Are we started? I had everything all lined up here too. Okay. We want to talk about that the ceremony called, in English it's called dancing under the paddle. Anuway. My grandfather, Kun Kayam, was the keeper of a ceremony called aat'a. He performed it in 1940 when it was against the law, so it had to be done in secret. I was born in 1941, and in 1944 he took me to a group that's called aaawaay. He always remembers what happened way over there, the ones who are keeping the history. And I was told I wasn't to reveal myself or this information to anyone, because there were people who, if they knew what I was, they would destroy me. So I was just a little boy at the time, and I took that very seriously. Well, Ts'a went home in 1945, and so that's quite some time ago. So even now I'm still reluctant to say anything about it, because I still feel like I'm supposed to keep those secrets, partly because of fear of the government, and so I still feel just a little bit leery or some wariness. But in 1982, after I finished law school, I went home to Heidelberg, Alaska, and my uncle Louis Kitkun, his name was Ts'a, and he called me to his house, and his wife was there, Alice, and Louis got his name Ts'a from Harris Natkong, and Harris Natkong's widow, Clara, was invited to be there, and my dad's older sister, Esther Morrison, I think I call her Gadu. I don't know if that's her nickname or her Haida name, but my dad was there, and anyway, they passed the ceremony to me, and so I had no idea what they were talking about. So I asked them, well, what's it all about? And so they gave rather a brief description of it. And then I asked, when am I supposed to do this? And the only thing Uncle said was, you'll know. And then in October 2014, well, I'll back up a little bit. There were things going on in my life that were pretty scary, that had to do with spiritual ways and people using bad medicine, that sort of thing. So I was told to come here among the Salish, because there's a medicine they make here from the alder, and I've never seen it, I've never asked about it, but I do feel like I've sort of been protected here in this area. So I always felt comfortable being here. And then in October of 2014, I don't know, remember what I was doing. I was walking along or something, sitting down, and I suddenly saw this big pond of water, just a body of water, and this thing come dropping down, a little pebble-like, and it landed in the water, and as the waves were radiating out, it's not so much I heard as I sensed the message was, it's time. And that really scared me pretty badly, because I was seeing all this stuff about what's going on, about how women were being treated all over the world, of men getting crazy when they think someone treats a woman humanely. And I thought, if I do something like what they've told me here, there's somebody's liable to come out there and attack me for it. I saw it in Samoa in 1996. My dad and I were there for every 4 years they have a Festival of Pacific Islands Art. 27 island nations from the South and Southwest Pacific gather for 2 weeks of, well, the celebration, their ceremonies, their medicines, their dancing, their singing, their sailing their canoes, all these things were going on. And there was one people that came from around Papua New Guinea. This was the first time that they were going to be dancing in public. And it was in a small auditorium. And the women, which was natural for them, were topless. And a guy ran out on the stage with a palm frond, whipping those women, yelling at them that they were abominations to get out of the public eye, chasing them off the stage because they were topless. And when I saw that, and this was a native Samoan that did it, and I've seen other things and I've been threatened myself, so I was very reluctant to go to do anything with this. And then I was teaching my Haida class, and I talked to Todd about it, Ilkiga. And so we talked it over and decided to do it. And so we did it in on May 4th of 2015. And a little bit of the background of it is, it goes back to the time of creation, as you say in English, but we don't use that term. We talk about when everything was brought into light. Nothing exists without light. And what we call a supreme being in Haida exists in two aspects, an intangible form and a tangible form. And the intangible one we call angal aanuwaay. Angal aanuwaay, the big spirit in the air. Air is invisible, so like the air, it exists, it's invisible, it exists nowhere in nothing, but that's what brought everything into light. And after that, after everything was brought into light, this angal aanuwaay sensed that something was not in balance. The universe is all about harmony and music and balance. And so something was not right. So it manifests itself into the tangible form, aanuwaay. Aanuwaay roughly translated as the big spirit in the atmosphere. We can always sense the presence of the atmosphere in terms of the temperature, humidity, wind, sun, all these things that make up our atmosphere. And so it manifests itself in that physical form and was sitting on this new thing we call now Earth. I never heard it called Mother Earth, just Earth. But anyway, this one was trying to discover what it was that was out of where there was amiss and start picking up handfuls of earth, like some people doodle, and was holding a handful, and then it started to cry. It was so saddened by its inability to determine what was wrong, it started crying, these tears of sadness. And tears clear the mind. So suddenly, it realized what was missing, and those tears of sadness turned to tears of gladness, and was falling into that handful of earth. And so, it squeezed that earth and looked at it, and it held its shape, this dampened earth. So the first human was shaped from that earth that was dampened with tears of sadness and tears of gladness. It was female. It was perfect. So the breath of life was put into it, sort of like CPR to get everything working, I guess. The only problem was nothing is made with only one side. So it was separated into two parts, and the second is male. And the only requirement to being human is to be born of a woman. So when a woman gives birth to that child, the first sound coming from that child signals it's now in harmony with the universe. It's all in harmony. And so there's a medicine called Ts'uswi, the spitting medicine, because of the sound t's. And that's the woman's power to pierce the heart, to kill or to cure. So we call it Jaat'a, Ts'uswi, sort of the woman's magic of harmony. And so that paints a whole different picture of the female part of the human species from what religion has painted. And so what was missing was there was nothing in everything that was brought into light. The beauty, the grandeur, the majesty, the magic of all this, there was nothing that could appreciate all that, nor could it express that appreciation. So this new one would be given that capacity to truly appreciate everything that was brought into light, including itself, and would be able to express that gratitude, but not in the form of words, but in behavior. And so it's said that life is like walking on the edge of a knife blade. If you don't watch your step, you could slip and fall off the world. In other words, we were given ceremonies for maintaining that balance. And if we fail to do those ceremonies, we fall off the world into chaos, which unfortunately we've done. And it was said that there were people that would discard the ceremony and try to create a new one. And the result would be destruction, like the wind gone crazy. So once this had begun, it also tells why our children belong to the mother. This is the source of life. That the woman carries the seeds of all humanity, the seeds of the future, of everything. And so they jokingly say we always know who our mother is, but sometimes we can't always know who our father is. So it's kind of practical reasons. And so a part of this gift of harmony, in this ceremony, women are to take back their legacy. I am human, and I will accept nothing short of being treated as human. We're not mankind, we're humankind. Like I said, the first requirement to being human is to be born of a woman. Thus we're not mankind, we're humankind. We have to get rid of the concept of race, for it implies a contest to be number one. We are all humankind. But to be humankind, one must be kind human. So as each of the dancers is called to dance, each must be aware that this is not about her, yet it's everything about her. Each woman represents the first woman. What does she bring into the world? Anger, hurt, guilt, hate, etc.? No. For this brief moment, she brings the awareness of being human, the awareness of carrying not only the seeds of human survival, but also the mindset that will instill in us and those yet to come a sense of completeness, of happiness, trust, sharing, and the knowledge that all of, we'll say, creation are relatives and not simply things. All humans share a beginning in common. None is superior. This brings us to the men singers and dancers.
This is meant to be.
Each of the men who are taking part in it, imagine there's a hook beside the door when they step through. This is where you hang your ego. You leave it there. For this is not about him, yet it's everything about him. He represents the first man. He has an obligation as a human male to protect the ones carrying the seeds of our future. He has an absolute responsibility to protect, provide for, to walk beside her through a world often fraught in danger, and to ensure that no one interferes in her quest to find her own special place in the universe. Each human is a unique creation and must be treated as such. The woman has feelings, hopes and aspirations, dreams, and as humans deserves to be treated as such. As she walks through this life, she has those dreams and those needs and wishes, and it's my responsibility to not interfere in search for her own special place and to ensure that others do not interfere with that quest. That which brought us all into being is beyond our understanding, so instead of simply worshipping it or trying to determine its essence or its plan, we live our lives with a certain knowledge that we are not in control. When we sing our songs, they're a form of prayer, for we are expressing our relationship with our relatives in the natural world. Each time a newborn child arrives and cries for the first time, it is the first human, a unique creation, and with that first cry, brings that one into harmony with the universe. Protect and nurture it, for each newborn is the first human, and our treatment of the new being will determine our human destiny. When that child is born, its whole universe explodes. Everything is new. And so everything we say, and especially what we do, that child is going to see. And it's going to remember and will copy. Because almost all human behavior is learned behavior. So if we're critical of that child is going to be critical of others. If we're kind and gentle to that child is going to be kind and gentle to others. So this is more than just a quaint exercise in an old ceremony. And as far as the mechanics of it, we've selected the number 13 because of the human, for the number of dancers and singers. There's 13 each. Our lunar calendar consists of 13 28-day months. 13 times 28 is 364 days with one extra day left over. That's when anything is possible. That's when alaagang can receive, we'll say, a heaven-born spouse. A person whose class is so low that it's almost like it's owned by another person. Alaagang. He has no family. And so the 13 women dancers, if possible, will represent the black, the yellow, the red and the white colors. The 13 men dancers and a leader, a paddle dancer, and assistant leader. The women assemble into a room separate from the main room where the dancing will occur. And they the ceremonial leader will form a line. The paddle dancer stands by the door where the women are about to enter. The assistant leader is positioned at the opposite end of the room from where the women are to enter. 2. The drums begin. The men sing a peace song that traditionally was sung by the women. The paddle dancers dances in place, and the men in line with and furthest from the leader dances toward the women's entrance. The leader calls the first woman by name, Jaat'a, come out and dance. And as she moves into the room, the paddle dancer has his paddle over her head. And he has to be, how would you say, committed to, I am protecting, I'm going to provide for this one. And so I'm demonstrating to the world that this is my job. The other man will dance beside that woman, and it was said that sometimes they'd actually mirror the movement of this dancer. And as they come into the room, they reach a certain place, and the leader calls to the men, Hostloan, that's enough. So they turn and go back. They dance away. And for her, Huga, you keep dancing until you find your own special spot. And she dances until she finds that spot. And then once she stops, then we call the next dancer, Jaat'a, come out and dance. And again, she brings that mindset with her. She's the first human, the first female human. And she's carrying the future with her. Not only of her own children, but her grandchildren too. And so each in succession will come out, and the women will stop where they find is their place. What women do is none of my business. We men don't pay any attention to that thing because it's none of our business. If women want us to know something, they'll tell us. Other than that, it's none of our business. And then the assistant leader will approach each woman where she stands on her special spot and present her a symbol of, we'll say, humanness. Then he returns to his position. The leader then signals to the women to move the center room and form a circle facing inward. Children are placed at the center of the circle. All the women in the audience are then invited to join the women's circle. The leader directs the men to dance and form a protective circle around the women and children facing outward. All the men are then invited to join the protective circle. The drums stop. The leader announces that this is the day when a man of no lineage can receive a starved or heaven-born spouse. The time for secrecy is ended. This day shall be the day when anything is possible. So we say this Haida prayer to ask for protection from the 7 directions, and then sings anuway. The host closes the ceremony with their protocols. So we'll be asking that the Musqueam, Ts'uwi, and Salish all be part of this, so that they can open the ceremony, this is their territory, and they'll close it. Did I leave anything out?
Which nations?
Huh?
Which nations?
Well, the ones that are around here.
Okay.
There's Ts'uwi, some people say Tooth, but I guess it's Todd, the Salish and the Musqueam. See, the coastal people in Haida, we call them Gituyas. Gituyas have been here very, very long time, since before the ice. They didn't leave when the ice came. The others, Ts'a, the Eagle people, the interior Salish, and all the Dene-speaking people are the Eagle people. It says as the ice began to leave, as they began moving north, these Dene-speaking people, the bald eagle came with them. Before the ice came, there was a giant black bird we called an angal, the black-skinned one. It was described as a black bird with a wingspan we'll say roughly about 25 feet across. It lived in the high places, and then when the cold came, it disappeared, and it hasn't been seen for many generations. I think it was a giant condor, because paleontologists have not found the ancient bones of those birds in the Andes Mountains.
They haven't?
They haven't. They've never found any of those. And so those are the people when they came north. The bald eagle came with them, and it didn't come to our islands until much later. And so we didn't have a name for it, so we used the Dene name, Ts'a. Ts'a is when it's a mature eagle. The head is white, it's got white tail feathers and so on. But
You say what?
huh?
Aat'a?
No. Ts'a is when it's mature. Hoot is when it's immature. It's got mottled brown feathers. And so it also goes on to tell of how we selected those birds as our crests, or for our to identify which aat'a we belong to. So the French call moiety, divided into two parts. So eagle and raven, and what it said is when the ice came, people left. Some Haidas left and went south. And the canoes they used at that time were called half canoes. They were roughly shaped two logs, but they had a sort of crosspiece to make it look like an outrigger coming, a two-hulled sailing canoe with a platform in the center. And so they traveled on the tide. See, the Japanese current sweeps across the Pacific going to the east, and then it comes down the Gulf of Alaska and keeps going south. It's a warm current, and so kept this part of the world very temperate. Then there's another one that comes from the Antarctic, comes north. It's called the Humboldt current, and we use that one to hunt fur seals. The canoes would go 2 days offshore out into the west, out into the Gulf of Alaska, until they hit that, well, a part of the Japanese current, right where it's next to the Humboldt current, and they would drift south until they heard the fur seals coming north, returning from migration for winter. And when they got close, they'd move into the same tide with them. They'd take what seals they needed, and but they paid attention to the stars, because there's no landmarks out there. You can't put a mark on the water and say, okay, this is where we start. So they would pay attention to the stars, and they knew when certain stars were there, that's when they would turn and go east, and they would bring them home. So they would do that every year. And anyway, some people left, and the story tells of how they traveled the great ocean circle. They went clear around the Pacific, and they were coming back on that Japanese current. And
The seal hunters?
huh?
The seal hunters?
No, these were Haidas who left during the time of the ice, and they kept going. And some people left with them, and when they were attacked, they fled. They said they ran across the water. They left and went out into the Pacific, and they ended up in New Zealand. They're called Waitaha, the water carriers, but they got there before the Polynesian Maori. But anyway, these Haidas kept going and went all the way around. And the surf hitting the shores creates a foam line, sea foam. And as the tide ebbs, as it's going out, that line of foam will move offshore. As the tide begins to flood, it starts coming back in. That foam will come back in close to the shore. And it said that's when these Haidas returned. There were 10 of these sort of raft-like craft came in. And when they were asked, "Who are you?" they spoke back in the same language. So they knew that these were the ones returning, who'd gone all that time. And people were a little bit afraid because it just come through a very trying time. The ice, because food still was not really very plentiful, but they welcomed them in, and they agreed among themselves that the ones who arrived could only marry the ones that were already here, and the other way around, to the ones here had to marry from them. And to keep it straight, they had to have some sort of a symbol to identify who belonged to which side. And the ones who traveled on that ocean circle said everywhere they went there were ravens, and these ravens would warn them, and they would lead them to food and this sort of thing. So they chose that as the one that's going to represent their side. And this was before, well, anyway, so the other one selected the eagle, Ts'a, because it made a long journey to get there, and something making a long journey is obviously something carrying a great deal of knowledge. So the eagle was chosen. So only eagle and raven could marry. You couldn't marry raven, raven, or eagle, eagle. And so that's where that came from. And the history keeper's job was to take historic events and create a myth, because you're not supposed to tell the history to everybody because they would change it. But if you take the knowledge and put it in a myth, they could change it however they wanted, but the lesson would always be in it. And so this is where the legend of Foam Woman came from. Foam Woman. It said all the ravens are the descendants of Foam Woman. That Foam Woman had 10 breasts on a side and 10 daughters. And so what it was there were 10 of those vessels with 2 sides. With 2 sides, and they came in with the foam line as it moved in. So they were the descendants of Foam Woman, and that's where that came from. So when a lot of the myths all have historic explanations to them, but we're not supposed to tell those. This is the only one that I'll tell. I may at some other time tell the one about Raven stealing the sun, the moon, and the stars, is the origins of that one. But this isn't the time. It'll be at another time. It's a very, very long story. It'll only take about a week to tell. So if you have any questions at this time, please hesitate to ask.
So will we have a feast before we start the ceremony?
Well, what we can maybe do is
Coffee and crackers?
Yeah, people shouldn't dance when they're hungry. They'll dance too hard. Well, we can normally the feast is afterward, but it all depends on how many, as to where the venue is going to be, as to how many people are going to be able to fit in here. So we have to take a look at some of those practical parts of it.
Yeah, that's why I thought this room was sufficient for throwing your 13.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a public spectacle.
No, we don't want it to be.
Well, this
Yeah.
is a public spectacle in this room.
It's easy enough to put up curtains
What I mean is,
with, Haida blankets or something.
What about the room upstairs where we went one day?
I was also thinking of that, but we can't do this next week. No one showed up today. We have briefed on what we're doing next week. So.
You think this was going to be next week, right?
Yeah, but
Well, I don't feel ready.
yeah, I know.
I don't either.
Well, we don't have to be, Liz.
We don't have to be. We can do.
We could do it in
A
December.
rehearsal. No, we're doing it in March then. I think the second half. I was planning on we do it twice.
Pardon
See,
me?
what we're looking at too is with our calendar. Our calendar actually begins in March.
Oh,
there's a solstice at that time, I think, in March. Because even the village is the way. Are you attracting flies?
Yes, I think it's this acai berry in the chocolate.
Anyway,
She's sweet. She's sweet.
huh?
She's sweet.
Mm.
What?
Sweet blood.
So yeah, in looking at those solstices and the way the moon waxes and wanes, it's even like when I was born was when the moon was getting stronger, and so whatever the date is, we